Hello and welcome to this round 10 of GP Sydney and our feature match area, stacked with talent but no table more so than the one that we're starting off with on here. These two players finished 8-1 yesterday and both have huge stories to tell in their history of Magic. Yuya Watanabe, one of the sort of top picks for Hall of Fame this year, and John Finkel, one of the top picks for top Hall of Famer or indeed top player of all time. Both of these players started out on blue-white, and I'm very interested to see how this matchup goes because we have two of the best players in Magic here, Frank Carsten.
Yes, the tournament is stacked with talent, especially at the top tables, as many of the pro players came out 1 week before the Pro Tour, which will be held here in Sydney as well, starting this Friday. But yeah, many of them came here to get some experience in the new draft set, as well as to pick up perhaps some additional pro points. So what's going on over here in this blue-white mirror? Not a lot yet. People are just playing some creatures. There's a Seagraph Scab on Yuya's side that is keeping the 2-1 Field Creeper at bay from Finkel. There are now 4 power worth of flying on Yuya's side of the battlefield, thanks to Spectral Reserves. A card that has been overperforming so far in the drafts that I did. Finkel, not much in the way of flying defenses yet. His Desperate Sentry, that's just a 1-2. When it dies, well, you get a 3-2 Eldrazi token. Oh, well, that's a nice combo. Extricator of Sin. So whenever that enters the battlefield, you get to sacrifice a permanent for a 3-2 Eldrazi token. Well, that Desperate Sentry is the perfect fodder for it.
And if it works out that John Finkel gets up to Delirium, he may be able to transform that Extricator of Sin. But for now, he's just going to content himself with having an awful lot of 3-2 Eldrazi, though he doesn't have any defense in the air. And the blue-white deck from Yuya Watanabe, even adding a Thraben Gargoyle there, which at some point, relatively soon, could transform into yet another flyer. And if John doesn't find a way of dealing with this Air Force, he could find himself in a spot of bother.
Yeah, without a way to stop the flyers, John is going to lose this damage race. Sure, those 2 Eldrazi Scions can attack into the 1-3 Seagraph Scab. That's no problem, but that's only 6 damage on the ground. John is already behind on life totals, and especially if the Thraben Gargoyle is going to turn into a 4-2 flyer on the next turn, Yuya needs a 6 land for doing so, then John is not going to be able to win this damage race. So John needs either some kind of removal spell or perhaps a flying blocker of his own. That's a Vexing Scuttler.
Yeah, the Vexing Scuttler there, being able to be played for a little bit cheaper thanks to Emerge.
Still, no flying and no instant or sorcery in the graveyard to return. It's just a big 4-5 monster at this point. It's okay, but so far John is still behind in the damage race against Yuya's flyers.
Yeah, and Spectral Shepherd, if it does get targeted by removal, Yuya does have the blue mana able to bounce it, and a Forest as the 6th land here for Yuya Watanabe, signaling something, but for now just signaling the transformation of that Thraben Gargoyle and some big swings in the air.
Now Yuya's thinking, should I attack with that Spirit as well, or maybe keep it back to chum block the Vexing Scuttler? Well, Yuya is in no big danger of dying yet, even if John might have a Borrowed Grace that gives his team +2/+2, a simple block by the Seagraph Scab will ensure that Yuya will survive this combat.
Well, John drew an Alchemist's Greeting that turn with no red mana available to him. He's just going to have to deal with the fact that there's big attacks coming in the air, get some swings in where he can, and follow things up here with a Daring Sleuth.
So now, if John has nothing and Yuya attacks with all of his creatures, Yuya will win with his Flying Force. But there are several cards that Yuya may have to think about. For instance, Unsubstantiate, bouncing his 4-2 flyer. It could also be Repel the Abominable, that prevents damage from all non-human sources. There are, let's see, what else is there? Just the Wind, bouncing an attacker. Of course, if John has nothing, then this attack alone will do it. So Yuya has to make sure that he puts on enough pressure to at least force John to have something, but also don't go completely all in so that he loses to, say, a single bounce spell. Alright, that's a safe attack, and John had nothing.
A relatively straightforward game 1 there for Yuya Watanabe. Picks up a single game against John Finkel, and these guys will be going to their sideboards. In terms of changes here, once you're drafting, you can potentially pick cards specifically to sideboard in particular matchups. Any key highlights we might expect to see here?
Well, if John left any flyers, even somewhat weaker flying creatures, in his sideboard, he will certainly be putting those in. John may also be interested in taking out some of the weak 2-drops, like his Field Creeper. They didn't match up well against the 1/3 Seagrass Scarp. It's not just finding cards to put in, but also which cards to take out, which creatures didn't match up well against the opponents.
So we're just moving across to get a quick look in on one of our other matches here. Seth Manfield against Chapman Sim. Both these players were 9-0 yesterday, and it looks like Seth on an aggressive red-black deck here. His Stormkirk Mentor has put an extra counter on the
Falconrod Reaver. That's now a 3/3. Yep, Seth is ahead in this game, and I don't know how he does it. Yesterday he also had a black-red deck. Nothing too special, just a bunch of creatures, a couple removal spells, a pump spell. No real bombs. His deck didn't look like anything special, but Seth Manfield is on such an incredible roll this year. Casually 9-0ing a GP again. Doesn't matter which continent he's on, which time zone. Yep, Seth shows up. Casually 9-0s. Deck doesn't even have to be good. He just smashes everyone who he plays against.
Couple of copies of Spontaneous Mutation here, enough to mean that Seth Manfield's attacks neutered pretty solidly from the blue-green deck from Chapman Sim, who told me this morning this is his first time drafting with Eldritch Moon. He's been traveling around a lot, hasn't had a huge amount of chance to practice with Eldritch Moon, at least in draft. It's now out on Magic Online, and that's one of the areas that he likes to practice the most. So came into this draft today a little nervous, but has a blue-green deck, and blue-green, the big standout mechanic for that one is Emerge. That's where we see the real action from blue-green, and there's a nice creature to sacrifice already on the board for him.
Oh yeah, the Enlightened Maniac. Typically it's there mainly because it brings a 3/2 Eldrazi token with it, but for the blue-green deck it's mostly an 0/2 creature with a converted mana cost of 4 that you can sacrifice to, say, Decimator of the Provinces, the big bacon hoof that's in Chapman Sim's hand. And it might just, like, if he so pleases, he could put it out on the battlefield on this turn already, getting a 7/7 Trampler. Then again, if he goes for that play, well, he could attack, but then he loses potentially in the damage race. He can also just sacrifice his, or transform his Ulvenwald Captive for 7 mana to turn it into a 4/6, have a blocker, and have the bacon hoof for later.
Okay, well, we're going to move back to our main match now because John Finkel and Yuya Watanabe keen to keep things going. We will almost certainly get a chance to see a little bit more of the other two players soon enough. John Finkel and Yuya Watanabe kicking off their game 2 here. Finkel a game down, looking to square things up against one of the likely candidates, I would say, for Hall of Fame this year.
Yep. Watanabe has been playing in every single World Championships that has been held so far, which is an incredible feat, and it just goes to show his dominance over the game in the past couple of years. And we'll get the battlefield to you as soon as possible as we continue with this matchup between two blue-white decks.
Yeah, Extricator of Sin here up against the Dawn-Griff. So again, we see a similar story in terms of Air Forces versus Ground Pounders, but this time John Finkel appears to have the edge in terms of attackers, though Nearheath Chaplin from Yuya Watanabe does a great job of blocking and potentially trading with something on the ground, gaining Yuya Watanabe some life, and then at some point making even more flyers.
Yep. Well, not this turn. It's being locked down, giving John Finkel a clue, and it won't untap for the next turn. Yeah, so far John is getting ahead in the damage race. Sure, Yuya has a flyer here, but John was able to put on a lot of pressure, so far Finkel is way ahead in this game.
Yeah, Press for Answers really did a lot of work there, bought a lot of time, but once again we see Yuya going with making a couple of spirit tokens there with Spectral Reserves, gaining a couple of life, and this is really, to me, exactly what we mean when we talk about tempo magic. We have lots of spells being played that kind of gain you a bit of life, gain you a bit of short-term advantage so that you can win the game soon enough, rather than necessarily dominate the game if it's going to go on forever.
Well, this game likely may not go on forever, as there's a dozen of perfection being added to the battlefield for John. That is one of the best cards in the set, really. Definitely one of the best blue cards to open. There we have it on screen. Even without any ability, a 5/4 flying for 5 mana would be a very powerful card. But with the ability, oh boy, you just get a team of wizards, and eventually it will transform into the final iteration, turning all those 1/1 wizards that you got as the tokens into, well, 3/2 flyers. Yeah, Watanabe better find an answer to that and soon.
Yeah, last game we did not see John Finkel doing too much to trouble the air. This time round, Docent to Perfection suggests that the air will be a little bit more cluttered sometime, because I can believe that John Finkel's deck has plenty of spells in it.
Oh yes, he made sure of that. We already see a Vexing Scuttler in his hand. That will be able to rebuy the Press for Answers from his graveyard, which will give him a wizard token, give him a clue, maybe draw into some more instant or sorceries. So John in control of this game, and Yuya will have to find a way around it. Yuya is behind in the damage race. He is behind on, let's say, big threat on the battlefield. This is the spot if you're Yuya and you don't have much. Well, you maybe have to try and bluff some things, like for example attack with the Dawngryph, even if you don't have a trick to pump it with. John Finkel is almost certainly not going to block with his Docent of Perfection, so you may be able to get in some cheap points of damage. Alright, aggressive. Attacking with the Spirit is a little unusual, because there are not many pump spells that really allow a 1/1 to beat a 4 toughness creature. But John says, well, I'll call the bluff.
Spontaneous Mutation and a Puncturing Light. Now that's a combination that I have not seen work out before,
No.
but it's beautiful. So basically what's happening here, first off, Spontaneous Mutation gets played. That makes the Docent of Perfection have less attack, and in turn means that Puncturing Light is able to do its thing.
Yep. So what's going on here? The Spontaneous Mutation turned the Docent of Perfection first into a 4/4, which, well, was not small enough to be targeted by Puncturing Light. Then combat damage happened, put the Dawngryph into the graveyard because it was blocked, turning well, the Docent of Perfection into a 3 power, and then at end of combat the Puncturing Light can be played and take care of it.
The old end of combat step. It's not something that we see used very often, but
No.
in this particular occasion, exactly what Yu Watanabe needed. And here we see John Finkel making the play that we called here, getting the bigger merge, getting that Press for Answers back again, because keeping Nihith Chaplain tapped down, kind of important for Finkel here, because he doesn't want to open the door to Watanabe to gain too much life.
Note that if John had blocked the 1/1 Spirit token instead of the Dawngryph on the previous turn, Watanabe would not have been able to kill the Docent of Perfection. So John may be regretting his blocking decision at this stage after seeing what Watanabe ultimately had in hand.
So just an Ox here for Yu Watanabe. In terms of Delirium, he's got Enchantment, Instant, and Creature in the graveyard. Oh, and Sorcery in terms of Spectral Reserve. So Delirium active.
So that's now a 3/6.
Finkel swings in, unafraid.
So, well, Yuya at 5 life has some choices to make here. He definitely has to block the 5 power Eldrazi, and double blocking means that he is lining up enough power to take it down.
Just the 1 life right here now. Nihith Chaplain, hopefully for him, going to alter that just a little bit.
Dauntless Qatar.
Cryptolith Fragment, potentially quite a big game here, though.
Yeah, if only it wouldn't enter the battlefield tapped. So, Cryptolith Fragment, it just taps for any color of mana, and then both players lose a life. Also, when at the beginning of your upkeep, both players have 10 or less life, it transforms into a 1/4 that, when it attacks, also reduces the opponent's life total by 3. Now, if it didn't enter the battlefield untapped, then John would have been able to just win the game on this turn. Now, well, Yuya could still attack with the near heat Chap lane to gain some life, but he felt he was just too far behind to get back from that point on, especially against all the creatures that were buffed by the equipment on Finkel's side.
So these players going to their sideboards, we will be seeing a game 3 between these two titans of the game. You see those numbers next to their names. Yuya Watanabe, currently 11th in the top 25 going into the last Pro Tour of the season. John Finkel, 17th. These guys have had yet another good year. I think that it's likely to be the case for basically every year that they're playing Magic, that they're having a comparatively good year, because two of the best players in the history of the game.
Yeah, and any additional points that they may get at this tournament may also help them qualify for the World Championships. If the cutoff for the World Championships would be right now, both of them would be qualified, but they are really on the edge of things at 51 and 52 pro points over the season as it stands. But, well, that 24-player prestigious tournament being held in the beginning of September, many people here are looking for the final points to secure their invitation to that. It's just such an honor to even be invited, and you really play for the title of World Champion. That's what any professional Magic player dreams of.
It's actually something that John Finkel has achieved before, admittedly quite a while ago. Playing Tinker, he was able to take down the World Championships against Bob Maher in the finals.
Back in 2000, man, this game has been going on for so long, over 20 years.
But John Finkel also potentially could make it to the World Championship this year as the Draft Master. This practice that he's getting this weekend could prove pivotal next weekend at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon in Sydney, as if he has a couple of good drafts, that could be the way that he locks up his qualification. He could also, in principle, qualify as the #1 Hall of Famer in terms of pro points earned over the course of the season, though Luis Scott Vargas is doing a fairly good job of keeping that a tight race. One way or another, John Finkel is looking to make his way to the World Championship, and hard to say that he's not going to make it one way or another.
Well, one thing that he will have to watch out for in order to get there is this spontaneous mutation. That little blue enchantment, we also saw it briefly in the match with Seth Manfield that we looked in at. It is one of those cards that may not look like much at first when you see it. Just gives -X, -0 to the creature, where X is the number of cards you have in your graveyard. But it has flash, so you can use it as a combat trick. And there are plenty of cards in blue, especially in Eldritch Moon, that mill, that is, put cards from your library into your graveyard. So there's actually a perfectly fine removal spell / combat trick that can do a lot of work for many blue decks. And whenever your opponent has 1 blue mana up in this format, if you're interested in firing up, say, a Magic Online draft, just keep that spontaneous mutation in mind.
Slow starts here for both players in Game 3. Dawn-Griff, the first player of the game on turn 3 for Yuya Watanabe. He on the play there. And John Finkel, does he have anything to match it on the third turn?
Well, he has Bound by Moonsilver, which means that he can basically take out the Dawn-Griff. This is not really the creature that he was planning to spend his premier removal spell on, but it's better to do something to the battlefield rather than basically spend your entire third turn doing nothing at all. And John Finkel's deck also looked to be a bit weak to flyers, as we saw in the first game, so just taking out that flyer while he can is not too bad.
Ingenious Scab being tapped down by Press for Answers, generating a clue for John Finkel, so even if he doesn't have a threat to add to the board here, he at least will be able to draw a card and not get beaten up by the Scab, which, with the amount of blue mana available to Yuya Watanabe, could potentially have attacked in for quite a bit on an empty board.
Yeah, I think John also had the option of playing a Steadfast Cathar, that's just a 2-drop, a 2/1, but instead he chooses to sacrifice the clue, get closer to his 5th land, so that he can play his heavy hitters. That 2-drop, especially by turn 4, wouldn't have that much of an impact on the game anymore, so I like that decision.
Looks like Docent of Perfection could be the play here for John Finkel, but he's facing down 2 copies of Ingenious Scab now, and the Scab with both prowess and this ability to give itself +1 power, -1 toughness, means that it's a bit of a problem in the red zone, and instead it looks like we've got a Faithbearer Paladin from John Finkel. Shoring up the ground a little bit, a 3/4 with lifelink will certainly give Yuya Watanabe pause a little bit in terms of what he wants to do for attacking. He's going to need a lot of prowess triggers before getting in fights there is going to be super profitable for
Well,
him.
you can always just spend 2 mana to turn it into a 4/1 and trade. Looks like that's what is going to happen. That's not too bad. You trade your 3-drop for the opponent's 5-drop. Sure, you have to spend some mana to do so, and John will gain some life in the process, but it's still a fine trade. Ingenious scarps for days.
And of course, casting Days would be great because it would trigger all of that prowess and you would just have bigger Ingenious Scabs.
So Finkel has a very powerful hand. I see Dustin of Perfection, there's a Vexing Scuttler to get back sorcery or instants from the graveyard. Looks like if the game would go long, Finkel has the edge with the cards in hand. And well, just this is the type of situation where you have to be suspicious as Yuya. Finkel 6 land and then plays a 2-drop and passes. Must be some trick coming up, and indeed it is Inner Struggle.
Oh, wow. Spell Queller, absolutely gigantic here. Naturally, these Ingenious Scabs are not ones that are able to be hit by Inner Struggle for too much. But he had to wait until the pump was there so that the power was at least equal to the toughness. And Spell Queller comes in, flash flying 2/3, and when it enters the battlefield, you exile target spell with convert mana cost 4 or less.
It's good. It's good in standard. It's well, it's also good in limited. And interestingly enough, even if John would find a removal spell for the Spell Queller, well, sure, then he can play the Inner Struggle. But there's only 2 trees on the other side of the board, so that would just force a 2/3 to deal 2 damage to itself. That doesn't even do anything. So the Spell Queller is absolutely perfect in this particular situation.
Yeah, and with the life totals 20 to 13, John Finkel very much on the back foot here. Steadfast Cathar getting stuck in, doing a little bit of damage, and now is the time to get back a spell with that big Shusher.
Emerge being put to good use there.
Yeah, Vexing Scuttler there, 4/5. Emerge for 7, which obviously got reduced a little bit there thanks to the creature that John Finkel sacrificed. Gets to regrow a spell, and also it's just a 4/5 body, which may be the most important bit right now because it's going to be difficult for Watanabe to do better than spending a bunch of mana to trade with it.
Yeah, well, without any instant or sorcery to trigger prowess, none of these Ingenious Scabs can effectively attack into the Vexing Scuttler and live. It is possible that Yuya may be interested in just attacking with all of his creatures, double pumping the Scab that is not blocked just to put down John Finkel down to 7 life, and hoping that his Spell Queller beatdown over the course of the next 4 attacks would get there. That is the type of game that worked for him in the very first game, where Finkel was kind of low on answers to flyers. But let's see what Yuya can come up with. Trigger prowess. Now that changes things. Because now the Scabs are 3/4, and with a double pump, they would trade with the Vexing Scuttler. That makes the attack much more profitable and easier.
Yeah, Spectral Reserves doing everything that Yuya Watanabe could want. He gains a couple of life, gains a couple of spirits, gains a couple of prowess triggers, and effectively gains a couple of attackers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good card for the situation. Now, John, given that he has so many good cards in hand, like the Dustin of Perfection, he has to protect his life total. Maybe trading a Vexing Scuttler for an Ingenious Scab is not what you're hoping for, but you cannot afford to take too much damage. Otherwise, well, it's going to work out badly.
Oh my. Well, prowess is already pretty solid when you're casting any spell, when you're casting combat tricks as well. Here a way for Yuya Watanabe to not have to do quite as much in the way of pumping. He naturally does that with his spells, and yes, takes John Finkel down to single digits. Just 5 life now for John Finkel. He has lots of spells in hand. I mean, we know that there's a Press for Answers that's going to potentially lock down one of the creatures on Yuya's side of the board, but he's kind of gone wide here. So even if John played a Docent, played another spell to generate a wizard, he may find that that's simply not going to be good enough.
If he had found an island here, he could play Docent, play Press for Answers, and get back into the game. Right now, he needs to deal with both of the Ingenious Scarps. He needs to be able to block both, otherwise, or tap both of them. Otherwise, he will be dead on the next attack. So it is possible that he may have to hold off on that dozen of perfection for another turn. Maybe play press for answers and then something else on this turn in order to survive. But even then, he's falling down to such a low life total. This is a tough spot, and you can see it in his face. He is not happy with his position as it is. If he can, he might also be thinking, well, what's it left in my deck? If I play press for answers now, sacrifice the clue, what could I draw? Maybe some removal spell for the spell queller. I don't think I have one. Or maybe he does. We'll see.
Yeah, I think press for answers is basically the only fixture in terms of what John Finkel's going to be up to here, because that at least buys him a stay of execution from one of the creatures on Yu Watanabe's side of the board, and immediately does crack the clue. But then there's the handshake. He does not find what he needs. Congratulations to Yu Watanabe. He advances to 9-1, defeating one of the all-time greats of the game.
Yeah, just looking at Finkel's hand, he had such an array of power over there, but Yuya was just too fast, basically. That Ingenious Scarp overperformed. Just a 2-3, but it became bigger with prowess. He was able to pump it. That creature, super efficient for its cost, and just based on the tempo boost that he gained from some pump spells, for instance, Watanabe was able to close this one out against the higher power level that Finkel still had remaining. You don't get a lot of time in this format. Games can go pretty quick.
But we do, because we've had quick games, we do get a chance to see some more magic from one of the other tables. These are 9-0 players. Chapman Sin up against the #1 ranked player in the world, our current world champion, Seth Manfield. And Seth has a Conduit of Storms that is currently spontaneously mutated to be comparatively small. But Stromkirk mentor there alongside
Gavany and Hallowed, that's the 2/4 that can grow whenever a creature dies.
Whenever one of your creatures dies.
Yes. Well, obviously Seth is ahead so far on board, as well Chapman has no creatures on his side yet. But Sim has plenty of non-land cards in hand that he can add and potentially put to good use. Let's see, I see a Traben Gargoyle there. That's just a 2/2 for 1 mana. Perhaps is that a Prey Upon? I think possibly a Grapple with the Past.
Yeah, Grapple with the Past, a great way of drawing yourself into what you need, potentially getting back something powerful.
Yeah, it's just peculiar that Chapman had nothing to play on his turn and was just forced to to pass. Now there are some flash creatures in the format. For instance, I was gonna say Swift Spinner from Eldritch Moon, but there's also Pack Guardian. That'll work, a 4/3 and a 2/2 as instant speed blockers.
Yeah, we've got some nice blocks being lined up here, potentially trading with the Stromkirk Mentor and killing off the Gavany Unhallowed.
Yep, that would be a fine block if Seth doesn't have any tricks, and he does. Savage Alliance for all the modes, so that's 2 damage to the 4/3, then 1 more damage to the 4/3 and 1 to the 1/1 to the 2/2, and trample to all of his creatures, meaning that he will be able to keep his Gavany and Hallowed around, trample over for several points, and come out ahead in this combat step.
Yeah, a powerful spell. It's very difficult to play around. It just generates card advantage left, right, and center.
It is one of the better uncommons in the set for sure. Always does something powerful.
Chapman now on just 5 life and has to be a little bit worried. I mean, the reason that we saw the Conduit of Storms attacking for Seth Manfield there is, even though it's not really doing a huge amount of damage, it can still generate mana by attacking after combat.
So Grapple with the Past. I love this card. It's kind of an impulse regrowth kind of mix. Mill the top 3 and then you get to return a land or a creature from the graveyard. Now, let's
Pack
see.
Guardian's a pretty good creature to return, right?
Yeah, it is, but Chapman is at 5 life. He's also facing off against the 3/5 Gavany and Hallowed at the moment. So that Pack Guardian, Well, if he wants to play it, he has to play the land, so it would just be a 4-3 without the 2-2 friend. That doesn't really do much. Now, the card, the colorless card in Chapman's hand is actually a Drownyard Behemoth, I believe.
Oh, Rise from the Grave on Impetuous Devils.
Sweet.
This will do it. A huge, hasty trampler getting to enter the battlefield for a second time this game. Forces a block of Seth Manfield's choice and means that he can have some gigantic attacks here on Chapman Sim.
And ultimately get an extra counter on the Gavony and Hallowed as well, because the Devils is going to die. So Chapman down to 1 life thanks to the trample. Now facing off 2 lethal attackers.
Yeah, Guy Reach Bandit also entering the fray. I mean, so much for Chapman Sim to do here just to stay alive this turn. He's got no interest in winning the game here, just simply not losing on this turn. Does have a drag under with which to bounce 1 creature, draws a card, but extends the hand shortly thereafter. Seth Manfield continues his undefeated run here at GP Sydney, now 10-0.
This world champion, I don't know how he does it, he just keeps on winning. Completely unstoppable. Chapman, he's been around for a long time. I chatted with him yesterday. This was his first 9-0 at a GP, so he was ecstatic. But yeah, when you then have to play against Seth Manfield, there's just no stopping this man.
But that is the end of our round 10. We are going to be with you with round 11 shortly enough. But for now, we're going to take a swift break, and you'll be back with Brian David Marshall and Marshall Sutcliffe.